Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports. It's Colonel Chris Wyatt live in central Pennsylvania with my guest today, none other than the leader of the United Democratic Movement in South Africa. It's Major General Bantu Holomisa, a friend of the program and a patriot for South Africa. General Holomisa, how are you today, sir?
I'm fine. I'm looking forward to participate in this topic of the day.
Absolutely. You know, it's a topic that it's near and dear to my heart. I've talked about coalitions in South Africa sometime, and I warned people about the hazards of coalitions, but also the benefits of it. Now, from what I've seen, you had your event that took place last week. That's which the UDM calls its National General Council. That took place in Midrand. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
All right. So is that like a party convention in which you discuss all the things that you plan to do and you've got on tap coming up?
It's normally a meeting where we discuss issues related to the UDM, looking at the past and also looking at in future, and also prepare for the elective Congress next year, December, as well as to see how far are we doing in preparing for elections of 2024.
Well, was it at this event, or will it be later in which the party picks, I hate to use this term because it sounds communist to me, but I know South African parties use this manifesto. I prefer to say party platform. But is it now, or will it be later that you develop and say these are our positions?
The manifesto will be later. We were discussing this past weekend issues which should form our manifesto, collecting that data from all provinces where we are represented.
Well, the thing that we're going to talk and focus about today, now that we've set the stage for folks, is something I called a grand coalition. You've come out with not quite those words, but something similar, talking about opposition parties uniting to stop one-party rule in South Africa. Is that an accurate description of what you're talking about?
It is. In fact, you will recall that in 1994, South Africa was run through a concept or a system called Government of National Unity, where various political parties were running the country, and it went well. But now we're seeing that the ANC is not doing well, that the honeymoon is over of one-party dominance. We feel strongly that we could at least build a stronger alternative with an aim to make sure that we go back to the original agenda, that of improving the quality of life of all South Africans, as opposed to the comrades in power who have decided to abandon that in favor of corruption. So we think that this is an opportunity where the people of South Africa first must converge under one roof. That would include political parties in parliament and outside parliament, as well as sectors of our civil society, and discuss the road map we have traveled since 1994, and to check if we are still on course. If we feel that the ANC has not done its work, what should we be doing? This is where then I foresee that the coalition or the model of the coalition will start taking shape.
So this coalition you're talking about, if I quote you incorrectly, let me know, because I'm relying on South African news services for the quotes. But I understand that did you say something along the lines that in a coalition like this, parties would not lose their identity; they would still have their identity, but we work together for the benefit of South Africans?
The political parties will not lose their identity, but we will be focusing on how to save South Africa as we see it, that it is on a slippery slope caused by the party which is in charge currently.
Now, you're oftentimes seen by many people who sit in Parliament, and I know this from having spoken to parliamentarians, as a person who's respected by most, if not all, people in Parliament. No one's ever respected by everybody, but certainly most people. And also at times, my words, not theirs, but you're kind of the sage peacemaker. When parliamentarians from different parties start acting like petulant children in Parliament, you've often been seen as someone that will step in and say, okay, gentlemen, ladies, behave yourselves. Is that a fair, or am I being too generous to you?
Well, we have tried our best, but such views are reserved for people like yourself. I cannot confirm or deny that I help when there is a need.
All right, fair enough, General Holomisa. That's a fair statement. We'll go with that. I like the humility. I think my viewers like the humility as well. Let me ask you this question about a coalition. Now, you're part of UDM. Of course, people know who you are. You're well known from your past, going back before the new dispensation back in 1994, and you've been a figure in public politics and in society since then as well. The UDM, however, is it's I don't know if people are paying attention, but in the last elections, 2019, you lost 2 seats in Parliament. You had 4. You're down to 2 now. Do you have any concerns about the party maintaining its position, or maybe some hope to gain some seats next year? And if so, does the party have a plan to increase its visibility and its popularity and its vote getting?
Yes, you are quite correct that UDM was one of the parties which lost some seats. The same could be said about other political parties except the EFF. The rest, we lost seats, ANC, DA, you name them. But be that as it may, in the last week General Council meeting, we were discussing exactly how do we turn around and make sure that we increase our representation in Parliament. The leadership also has been beefed up with strategic people who will be dealing with various subjects. That team will be approved on the first week of June, and then it will be told to go and hit the ground running. So I'm definitely sure that the climate is conducive for parties like UDM to increase its numbers.
Now, famously in the 2019 elections, the Democratic Alliance, my description, the Democratic Alliance chose to run as the ANC light, saying that we're not the ANC, but many of their policies were the same as the ANC's. And they turned off a lot of their voters, particularly minority voters, but not exclusively minority voters. A lot of DA voters migrated to other parties, newer parties. And now there's even more new parties, the most famous of which obviously is Action SA, which gained a lot of attention in municipal elections. So for this election, so June 1st, your party's going to start pushing. Your election campaign has already started. You're going to get out on the ground and try to draw people to your standard. What will be your focus? Because the DA was saying we're not the ANC. I suspect that's not going to be your platform. You're not going to say the UDM is not the ANC. Is your platform to focus on ideas and solutions for South Africa? And if so, when might we see some of those? Will it come with the manifesto?
The policies of the political parties in South Africa are more or less the same. But the question is, how do we implement these policies? Poverty is poverty. You are not going to give it another name. The people will be interested as to how do you deal with poverty in making sure that people live a better life. Same applies with unemployment. But in the case of South Africa, there is no way that we can expect the investors to invest in this country comfortable in a climate where the crime is so high and violence is so high, and also the corruption is on a higher level at the leadership level. So those are the areas which the UDM would like to bet on. In fact, we have been betting on an anti-corruption ticket since our inception. So I foresee, therefore, that if there is a coalition, we will be definitely bringing some ideas to have a common manifesto of the parties if they work together. One thing is certain, though, in South Africa, there is no political party currently which can alone remove the ANC. ANC is a party of alliance. But that tripartite alliance has failed the country. So we need another alliance, an alliance which will be composed of all who are keen work for South Africa, not for individual pockets.
Well, I will quote you here, and it goes in line with what you just said. You were quoted saying, this must not be read as a negative, but rather as a positive outcome of a flourishing democracy. This outcome will promote checks and balances that are needed in South Africa, given the corruption that we are experiencing due to the current one-party dominance in national, provincial, and local spheres. In other words, there's no one to be an honest broker to check the government in power. I believe that's a fair analysis of what you said there.
Yes, because the parliament is dominated by the same ruling party. And then when it comes to people who are supposed to do an oversight, you will find that even if there are wrong things, they will always protect their cadres, which they had deployed in those institutions in the first place.
There's actually one of my guests just asked a question here for you, General Holomisa, which is a little bit from where I'm headed, but it's a fair question, so I'm going to bring it up now. Chris Wyatt would like to know, he said, General Holomisa, has your party ever considered a strategic permanent voting pact with the Inkatha Freedom Party going forward for the future?
I'm fortunately chairing a number of sessions of the 13 opposition parties in Parliament. IFP is one of those. Even this issue of the coalition, we chat to them. We work with the IFP every day. So I don't see any problem in having IFP in the coalition. So we work with them. I also work, for your information, with the ANC. When it comes to issues of national interest, I put the party cap aside and focus on those programs.
Well, that's something that we all wish for from our politicians, is they serve the people and the nation and the Constitution first, and not their parties. It's good to hear that, sir. And I'll quote you again, and this is in line with those coalitions. You said, there are more issues where we as South Africans agree than disagree. Among others are the economy, corruption, service delivery, unemployment, poverty, education, health, environment, crime, safety and security, and civil disobedience. It's therefore possible to rally behind these unifying issues, but we must find a workable model, a vehicle, a common language, and a common message.
Yes, I confirm that. I said so last week, because we know that we are not happy about what is happening, especially under the topics I've highlighted. So we have to find a solution. And whatever manifesto we'll come up with, if we were to form a coalition, let's call it a pre-election coalition arrangement, we would have to have highlight those paragraphs, those points, and come up with some suggested solution to a voter.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I understand where you're coming from on that. Let me delve into a little bit different territory here. Not to put you on the spot, but you've spoken on this topic. You've spoken on this topic in the past yourself. We hear this frequently when it comes to the Democratic Alliance. But let me make this statement, and first, let me get your response. I think you'll probably agree with this. Whether you like the Democratic Alliance or not, whether you see yourself as a Democratic Alliance voter or as a voter for Freedom Front or UDM or IFP or Action SA, whether you like it or not, in 2024, if you want to end one-party rule in South Africa, the DA must be part of that solution. You can't exclude that 23% of the vote that they will get. It's needed to form a grand coalition. Do you think that's a fair statement? Or, I mean, I don't see how it's done any other way.
It's a fair statement. We, in this forum I'm chairing, they are part and parcel of it. And we want to make sure that in South Africa, all the interest groups are catered for. And that if DA and other black political parties can work together, as they have demonstrated from 2016 when we pushed the ANC out of the big metros. DA worked with EFF, UDM, and other parties. So I foresee, therefore, that they would be part of the coalition if they are interested. But the big brother mentality, they must leave it outside the door, because we would like to make sure that the manifestos of different parties or interests are integrated to talk to have one manifesto.
Well, obviously, not all manifestos are going to agree. So probably the smart thing is the big crucial issues like corruption and ESCOM and things like
The
that.
ones I've highlighted.
Yeah, those will be the highlighted issues. Parties will have their own issues that not necessarily align, but maybe they can agree on that. Now, you raised a topic, which was the second part of my question. You preempted it, so thank you for that. It was apropos. And that is the question of parties. Michael Beaumont from Action SA has said it more than once. Gayton McKenzie from the Patriotic Alliance has said it. Others have said it. And that is that we often hear from other parties that the Democratic Alliance is arrogant or acts like they're the big brother and it's our way or the highway. We got the most votes. It's a coalition. You're a minor partner. And you seem to give the impression that that attitude really needs to be stripped away and disappear because you're not going to get people to rally to a joint flag together to unseat the ANC if you're going to determine all the rules. I believe, based on what you said, that's a pretty fair assessment. Would you agree or disagree?
Yes, they will have to change that perception and be pragmatic. Fortunately, I've arranged trips abroad to Germany, to Denmark, where we were on a study tour on coalitions. And they were told, the DA and other big parties there, including ANC, that if you guys are going to think that because you've got 49% and you're short of, let's say, 2 or 3% to constitute a majority, you have not won election. That's the bottom line. Therefore, you have to be accommodative to the interest of other small parties. So I foresee, therefore, that at national level, the DA would have to understand that a coalition at national level, they need to be stable and that you accommodate everyone who would be part of that coalition. So the time of bullying at local government level is over. It will not work at national level.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of people have talked about this election as a critical election. I mean, to be honest, I think all elections in South Africa are critical, but this one is especially important. My projection on the 1st of November when the municipal elections took place was that I projected on the 2nd of November that based on the events at the time, that the ANC would get a peak of 42% of the popular vote and somewhere between 38 and 42% based on the events in 2021. Now, a lot of people look at me like, well, really? You're going to stick with that? I'm sticking with that projection. And there is a possibility, given the load shedding, the collapse of the economy, joblessness, the 72 murders per day now that are happening. Anybody can be hit anytime, anywhere. We're seeing that that number could crater even more. We'll see. And if it goes lower, my assessment of this, based on 2021, is that it will probably be because ANC voters don't necessarily vote for another party, but they don't show up. We saw that in KwaZulu-Natal, where the IFP gained, or I think they lost 2% of their votes. They didn't really, so they pretty much treaded water. They have about the same number of votes in the municipal election. But because ANC voters were angry about July 2021 and other reasons, they simply didn't vote. And so the IFP managed to go from 8 municipalities that they controlled outright through a vote or through a majority coalition or a minority coalition to 16. I suspect that we'll see that again in 2024. So whatever votes you can get for the UDM should have a bigger impact because I think a lot of ANC voters are going to stay home. Do you think that'll be the case?
We are facing a big challenge when it comes to convincing the voters, or rather when we address the voter apathy. Let me put it that way, voter apathy. We would have to work hard so that the voters can come out on the day of voting. So voter education is going to be key. However, we must not make a mistake. The ANC has got a machinery which if they want to use, they can use it effectively. But the advantage which we might have currently is because they are fighting amongst themselves.
Indeed, they are.
So, which is to our advantage. So we might see, therefore, that a lot of independent candidates who might have been frustrated by other factions within the ruling party would reduce the numbers on the other side. But you may never know. It's if Cyril Ramaphosa didn't have this dark cloud hanging over his head or shoulder, well, I would say he would have still be bringing the ANC voters back. But this ANC themselves, their members are beginning to ask, who is this guy? Why is he not decisive? What's going on? What does the other people have on him? So, but that's ANC politics. But we'll go straight to the voters.
Well, you mentioned who is this guy? What is he up to? I think that we should get a nickname for Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, a new nickname would be, the Breakfast Man. I mean, he's a waffler of great origin there. The guy waffles on everything. So Nick Rose asked another question, or made a statement. He said, only solution is long-term. Eat the elephant in little bites. The coalition has to be obediently loyal and honor the pack. Well, I agree with the second sentence, but it's not time to eat the elephant in little bites. That time has come. The ANC's been whittled down from 2/3 majority to below 50%. So it's not time for little bites. It's time for big chunks. But the coalition will have to work together. We see how coalitions have fallen apart in the past, not to throw shade on your party, but in Nelson Mandela Bay when Athol Trollip was mayor. We've seen it in Shwane. We've seen it in Joburg. We've seen it in Ekurhuleni. It's all over in West Ram. So, in fact, you talk about the ANC fighting itself. Just this week, we saw the caucus in Joburg in the council. ANC, are those our councillors leaving? Lusufi, the regional party leader, was shocked. Now Fikeli Mabulula, the Secretary General, has got to step in and sort out the mess because they reneged on their promise to the economic freedom fighters. I mean, look, as an opposition party, from a political standpoint, not from a governance standpoint, but from a political standpoint, it must be kind of fun at times to sit back and relish watching your opponents eat themselves alive. You don't have to respond to that if you don't want to, but I'm just saying it's got to be entertaining.
Well, I'm celebrating partly because I was expelled from the ANC by mentioning a word, referencing a word, corruption. Today, they are accusing each other of corruption, and they are tearing each other apart into pieces, tearing each other, the party into pieces. So it's entertaining, but one also is concerned that if we don't rescue the situation, the civil service delivery is affected, and the day the citizens decide to distance themselves from political parties, then that will be a problem for us because they will not be controllable. They will be controlling themselves, like we have seen in other parts of the continent.
Well, in fact, General Holomisa, you were expelled from the ANC over 2 decades ago, if I recall correctly, and it was at a time when the ANC was rather inept at its corruption. I mean, back then we had people getting arrested and imprisoned for things like getting discounts on getting cars, like Tony Yengeni. Now the corruption is trillions of rand, PPE money, loans, it's everything under the sun. So you were definitely prescient over 2 decades ago when you were booted from the party.
Oh yes, at least it was Tony Yengeni only, but the arms deal scandal. A lot of people benefited, but it looks like he was a fall guy.
Yes, well, definitely. But it was definitely corrupt. I mean, but the corruption was inept compared to what was going on with the arms scandal, and then, of course, the list goes on and on. People forget about this. We have the arms deal. We have Oilgate, where they sold the National Strategic Petroleum Reserve and then paid a BE company to manage it after they sold it to them for a song. And then you have Travelgate, and the list goes on and on and on. It's just, Pala Pala. Oh, you talk about a dark cloud over Cyril Ramaphosa. Were we referencing Pala Pala? The dark cloud?
Yes. That was a Pala Pala issue.
Yeah, Pala Pala, which Parliament voted, and quite with great indignation, members of the ANC, no. It was, if it wasn't sad, it would have been hilarious to watch that vote. I covered that vote live, and it was quite shocking. I think some people were surprised that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma voted to take the report, but it doesn't come as a surprise to me. I mean, she was within 35 votes of becoming the next president back in 20. So, it shouldn't shock people. But Nick Groves has said, we've got 2 things here. I've got a hard question for you, actually, from one of my viewers, but let me get this first comment. How do the trade unions in South African Communist Party manage to align with 40% of the unemployed? They're disingenuous unless their money is floating around the top tiers. Well, trade unions and how they influence people, get people to vote for them, it's similar in the U.S. and Europe as it is in South Africa. They say that they're out for the people's interest, but oftentimes they're out for their own interest. I don't know if you want to field that question at all, how the trade unions still have so much influence in a country with such high unemployment.
Unfortunately, the unions in South Africa are frustrated because they are losing membership because of retrenchments. So in terms of influence, I don't think even the ruling party is taking them serious anymore.
Yeah, the tripartite alliance is just a name these days. It really, I don't think is in effect. Well, I mean, it fell apart during Zuma's time, because COSATU was tired of the nonsense with Zuma, and they threatened to break it apart. It really kind of fell apart then, I think. Now, here's the hard question for you, and this is actually a very good question, but I wouldn't have dreamt this question up because I don't even think it's a realistic thing, but let's see. We have a South African who's a pilot who recently came to America, and he says, will the UDM work with the ANC if the ANC needs a 1 or 2% to get a majority? Now, you yourself have said you work with the ANC on certain issues. They're not addressing other issues. So would the UDM go into a coalition with the ANC if it needed a 1 or 2%? Interesting question. Now I put you on the spot.
No, that's not a spot, man. I'm just in it nicely under a shade of tree, enjoying my coffee for that question. The truth of the matter is that the coalitions are forced by the voters. And then if the ANC is given the first preference to move around, talk to other parties, surely UDM will be part of those parties. They would consult. So depending on why do you want to get into coalition in the first instance, if you have your manifesto and then they are prepared to, let's say, for instance, you are campaigning about the implementation of Zondo Commission's findings, and then the ANC comes to me and say, can we work together? And then we put conditions and say, let us demonstrate within the following period that we will implement these findings. If not, the UDM will go out of that within the period of 6 months. So these are kind of negotiating tools. I can put them up. And also that when we come to the law enforcement agencies, we want a new trajectory. Training, recruitment, and promote people on merit, not because you choose a friend or a girlfriend or boyfriend of yours. So it would depend, really. I can work. I don't have a problem in working with any political party in South Africa for coalition. This question of putting preconditions for coalition, it is not working. I've seen in Germany where you see the far hardline socialists working with the Christian Democrats. So it's not. But what is key is ANC, you are known to be corrupt. Are you going to allow that now that we work with other parties? Change that thing, and then you list your things which have been your concern. I think I must stop.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good spot. I'm gonna have to call you out on this, Bantu. I'm gonna have to call you on this. Listen, apparently you are not familiar with how things work in South Africa. We don't promote people based on merit. We only promote people based on patronage and family ties and party affiliation. It's party over people. I think as a political party, if the UDM is based on merit, you're destined for the dustbin of history.
Well, those voters who would have given me 2 or 3 votes, and then ANC comes to me and say, that issue of cadre deployment, it will be a thing of the past. And we will say to them, let's go back to the laws of the country. The Public Service Commission has got powers to employ people in government. So if they don't agree with me, they must go and knock to other parties' doors
Ah, there you go. Well, I like your answer. It was very clear about essentially, you would be willing to work with the ANC provided they're willing to clean house and behave as a proper governing party. And if not, you'll withdraw your support and you'll make that clear at the outset. Well, that's that. I don't think we can ask for much more than that from a political party. This hard line, I'll never work with these people. I'll never work with those people. Listen, I mean, as a journalist, I do have a hard line, and that's I don't invite EFF members onto my program. But beyond that, I invite everybody else, including the ANC. But I have a distaste for the EFF. I cover their events, but I won't interview them and give them a platform. But that's my prerogative for my hard line. But in a political situation, you seem to be making a lot of sense here. So, listen, I want to ask you this question. Given the opportunity, will you be arresting Vladimir Putin?
Wow, no, thank God I'm not in government.
Exactly.
That is the problem of the ruling party.
Exactly. Well, no. It's not just a ruling party. One opposition party has declared unequivocally that they will arrest Vladimir Putin should he rock up on South African shores.
No, I don't think Putin will go to Cape Town. He has got a message from the mayor of Cape Town or the provincial premier of Cape Town.
No, I think he'll land at Waterkloof.
Yeah, but on a serious note, I think the issue of Putin and other developed countries, how I wish they had signed this ICC convention. So that if there's someone, for instance, in the US is misbehaved to the extent that he or she deserves to be charged by ICC, that would be okay. But for now, it looks like this thing is designed for developing countries or small, poor countries. So this debate is taking us to another level, in other words, is to say, what about other countries? Why Russia was not signatory, for instance, to this ICC? So, which means someone must just say this is nothing else but politicking.
No, it's a fair point. I, of course, in graduate school did a lot of research as the Rome Statute was drafted largely by U.S. Diplomats on behalf of the United Nations. But when it was adopted, we refused to become a signatory, the United States. Russia's not a signatory. China's not a signatory. I don't think China's a signatory. I could be wrong. Maybe they've signed it since then. They're not. And Ukraine is also not a signatory. That's why I find the whole situation with what's going on with the other opposition party talking about arresting someone, the warrant isn't valid. Putin may have committed war crimes, but the ICC has no jurisdiction over him. The crimes that were purported to occur in Ukraine, which is not a signatory. And if you don't sign it, the statement is very clear that it doesn't apply to you. Now, your point's fair. There's a section in the Rome Statute, Article 98, that gives protections to heads of state and officials, military and security officials. Now, when the Rome Statute went into effect, as a person serving in Africa for our U.S. government, providing military assistance to our friends, partners, and allies in Africa, we were prohibited from providing military assistance or funding until that country agreed to honor the Article 98 waiver, not to extradite our officials. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't sign it. Countries did, for the most part. South Africa took a while for them to agree to adhere to the Article 98 conditions, but they did eventually. But for the most part, almost every country did agree in the end that they would recognize it and extend those protections to our officials. But I'm not sure why we've never signed it since then. And I understand your point. It does give the impression that it's designed to go after smaller countries. I wouldn't say necessarily developing countries. It's been used to prosecute primarily people from former Yugoslavia. It's been used extensively there for Radovan Karadzic, Slobodan Milosevic, and a bunch of others who committed crimes, Mladic and others in that area. But yes, there have been Africans. I think the problem with General Holomisa with the ICC that most people don't understand, you're probably well aware of this, but most people understand is that the court has jurisdiction if a country is unwilling or incapable of prosecuting someone for these crimes, and then they refer the person to the court. And that's the primary fashion. So we see a lot of African countries complain about the court being biased against Africa, but those very countries referred those people for prosecution. So the court's a bit frustrating. It's not what some people hoped it would be. And I certainly appreciate your position. It'd be nice if we're going to use it, that if everybody signed up for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're kind of in agreement on that. So the election next year, provided it doesn't fall in a time when I'm doing consulting, my intent is to be in South Africa the final 2 weeks of the election campaign, and then the week after that to cover the election. So I don't know when it's going to be, but maybe June to September we might see the election. But whenever they set the date, I plan to be there. And I'd like to go if you have any rallies or things like that and cover your party as well.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I think the elections will be around August or so, because within the April and August, so it could be around August. Every party will have had enough time. And also the IEC, I think, would have had an opportunity to find out what if in the independent candidates, there are more than 100 candidates. How will that be accommodated in a ballot paper? So I wish them well in that. But you are welcome to cover.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't speak Xhosa, but I do know Tswana. All right. Yeah, very good. So Major General Bantu Holomisa, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. I know you're busy. You've got some travel tomorrow. So best of luck, and I'll see you when I'm back next time, hopefully. And always a pleasure to link up with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
All right, folks, that was Major General Bantu Holomisa from the United Democratic Movement. Let me get him off the screen here. Okay, there he goes. He got himself off. All right. Well, thank you, General Holomisa, for coming on. We appreciate it, and thanks for answering the questions. He didn't think any of the questions were hard. That kind of caught me a little bit by surprise. I thought that maybe the question about whether you'd support or join the ANC coalition. So there you have the answer. There you have the answer. What is a signatory? A signatory is a country that signs and then ratifies a treaty. That's a signatory. So signatory is someone who signs. The United States is not a signatory of the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court. Therefore, it has no jurisdiction over the United States or our citizens. Yeah, so there you go. All right, well, I hope you all enjoyed that. Stay tuned. Come back on the program later today at noon Eastern Standard Time, in less than an hour and a half, and at 6 p.m. South Africa time. It's John Laban. We'll be talking to John Laban about his recent book, The Boer Invasion of Zululand, 1837-1840. We're going to cover that topic, and hopefully you'll find the interesting South African history coming up at on the program at noon Eastern Standard, 6 p.m. South Africa time, 5 o'clock in the UK, and on 6 o'clock in mainland Europe. Yep, so there you go. There will be more than 100 candidates, all hoping for 50,000 votes. So exactly. That's the problem. Yeah, that is a real problem. Black Quiver missed most of it. Well, the nice thing about YouTube is you can go back and watch it from the beginning, Black Quiver. Boer invasion, more like migration. Well, it's a matter of perspective, Charles. It's a matter of perspective. Land was occupied where they went. They reached an agreement with Dingaan. And it all goes from there. If you're a Zulu, it didn't look like a migration. It looked like something very different. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot. We'll see John Laban up here, Professor Laban, later. And then I will do news today, but it won't be until this evening. I have volunteer training for the election coming up on the 16th of May, our primary election here in Pennsylvania. I'm a judge of elections. I go to 2 training sessions, one specifically for judges, that's next week, and one for volunteers, so that I know the training that my volunteers are getting. So I'll be there this afternoon, which will preclude me from doing the news until this evening. So it will be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. Will be Chris Wyatt Reports. I'll be doing that news program. It'll be midnight for South Africans. So if you're up late and you want to hear the news, you're welcome to join us then. Rovane Freiba says, what a joke. What is a joke? Can you tell us what the joke is? That's not a really helpful statement. Land occupied by Orange Free State by Matabele, who just moved in. Okay, Charles, we can have this debate all day long about that land occupied by the Matabele. Well, the Basotho were there, the Tswana were there, the Griquas were there, all in the Free State. Yeah, but yes, most of the land was vacant because of the effects of the Mfecane. So we can have this conversation. I believe in historical accuracy, and what I say is historical fact. So what about the Mfecane? I just said the Mfecane. What about it? What about it? All right, folks, we look forward to seeing you later. Charles, it looks like you need to show up for that conversation. And we'll see you guys in about an hour and 15 minutes. So thank you all so much. God bless and have a lovely day. And thanks for tuning in once again to Chris Wyatt Reports. We appreciate it. All right, folks, thank you. What's going on there? That ain't right. That's not how things are supposed to be. I'm still on screen, folks. Something ain't right. There we go.